Okay, so I got all this radiator and everything put back together on this truck, and I was getting ready to put the coolant in it, and while I was kind of doing some flushing and things like that on this deal, I was in here working on the dash on this truck some because it had some lights burned out and things like that in here, and of course nobody can stand that. I sure can't. But I ran into another problem. Of course I did. When there's cheap vehicles involved, that's all there are problems. But anyway, so this is a fuel tank selector switch. This truck has 2 tanks on it, like a lot of Ford pickups do, especially these year models. And when I pulled this thing out of the dash cluster, the binnacle that goes around it, or the whatever you want to call that thing, the face plate, what am I trying to say, the bezel, I saw that there's 2 wires broken here. And so I went and did some Googling on that to find out, pulled up a wiring diagram to see what they are. And that's the power and the ground to the tank selector. And they were chewed apart, at least most of the way, and then they must have broken or whatever, because there's chew marks on it. I can see that, so the mouse has done his work in there. And then after that, I noticed the fuel gauge said that it had about a half a tank in it, but you know, my mind goes off on a tangent on stuff like this, and I can't let it go. So I started thinking about, well, what tank has half a tank in it, and does it actually have half a tank in it? Because that thing, when the wires are cut to, like I said, it just shuts that thing down. Now, you may actually be reading. I don't really understand everything I need to know about these things, how they work. But it's got a switching valve back here, and then the switching valve has got contacts in it. So, in whichever position that the valve is in, that indicates that, you know, if it's to the rear tank, pulling from the rear tank, then it directs the fuel gauge to read off the rear tank, and vice versa up here. So, I went and got some spelunking equipment, which was mainly a long piece of wire with something attached to the end of it, so I didn't happen to lose the wire down in the tank and not be able to get it back out. And went investigating, and they both have something in them. This one doesn't have much of anything in it, but this smells like diesel. And so, okay, that's enough. It's been a long time since I've had a diesel vehicle, so I don't necessarily trust my nose to identify what that is in there. But this one had a substantially more something in it. And I actually used my transfer pump, which I put back over and let it dry out over there before I put it up. And pulled out a fuel sample. And I don't remember diesel looking this color. This looks an awful lot like gasoline. And like I said, my mind tends to go on tangents sometimes. And I'll convince myself of something that's not actually the case. Now, whatever spewed out of there, it's still on the ground there, and that looks like diesel because gasoline would have evaporated. So I'm just going to take a gulp of this and see. No, I'm not. It's got I feel like I detect a little bit of gasoline in there. I'm just not sure. So I think what we'll do a little bit more of a scientific test. Now, diesel, if I pour a trail of this out and pour it over to this seat right here and douse the seat with it, then it should go up like a torch if that was gasoline. If it's diesel, it will hardly do anything. So we're not going to do that. But what we're going to do is we're going to just do a little test here. We're going to pour this out here in the trail, and then we're going to light it up. And as it burns, if it burns, then I'm going to smell of it. I know what diesel smells like when it burns. So, all right, let's see what happens here. That's not gas. That is not gas. Okay, that's good. See, diesel, I'm telling you, like I said, my mind goes off on a tangent, and I'm not satisfied until I've established Yes or no? That's not gas. Okay. All right. That's good. That's a good thing. That's a real good thing. So if we go in here, my high dollar shop here, if I go in here and get some rope and I dunk it in this, the rope should burn slowly. Okay. Only on YouTube, right? Alright, so now, see if I can do this without really starting something on fire. Match in the gas tank. Boom, boom. At least I've got water beside it if something does happen really bad. Alright, there we go. Let me smell that. That's diesel. Okay. That's diesel. Good. 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 Because you might be wondering, why is this a big concern about it? Well, the thing is, you can't put gasoline in a diesel engine, especially a direct, any diesel, but this being a direct injected diesel. Yep, that's diesel. You can't do that. That's really bad news. So if this was gas in there, if somebody had, you know, I can't hardly believe that anybody would have done that, but if somebody had slipped gas in this thing accidentally on purpose, then I started up and run it, or if I start screwing around with these tanks, that was the thing I was really concerned about, because if I messed around with the tanks on this thing and I switched it to the back tank and the back tank's got unleaded in it, then boom, gas in a diesel engine, boom, boom. That's right, and be picking up some connecting rods and probably pieces of the block and some other stuff off the ground. So anyway, that's good. I'm satisfied that's diesel. So I think for the time being, it's got a lot in it. So I'm assuming, I'm gonna, let's not say that, shall we? I'm gonna take a guess that, a wager, if you will, that's the tank it's run off of, that when the mice chewed the wires through and the tank selector ceased to function, then they probably ran it out at least one time until they figured out that it was only run off the back tank. So these things have they're curious. These things have two tanks. One of them is in the frame right there. That's the big one. Was the big one, isn't it? And then I think they call that the side saddle tank. And then there's another one. The other one is back here, under here. I don't know how many. I need to look that up. I'm kind of curious. Looks like a car gas tank. But anyway, oh boy. So I have kind of sucked mud on this stuff this weekend. I started out with plans to have everything, have all this cooling, radiator stuff put back together. I've got coolant to go in it. I've got an oil change to go in it. And I just didn't get there because I got distracted, had yard work to do, and had to go drive my car around some. Had to. I get a real kick out of that car. And then I did actually have to fix my truck over there. The other, last year, about this time last year, one of the left rear wheel cylinder blew out and leaked brake fluid all over the linings. So I bought a set of brake shoes and one wheel cylinder and replaced it. Because why in the world would, you know, if one of them blew out, why in the world would I expect for the other one to blow out? Well, a year later, the other one blew out, did the same thing. So fortunately I had the shoes left. All I had to do is just swap the shoes out, clean everything up, and put a new wheel cylinder in it. It's back up and going. But anyway, oh, got a ways to go on this thing. I've got, as you can see, I've got the interior out of it. I've just been kind of picking away at some different things in here as I go along. I've already been to the junkyard. You know, working on the interior stuff is to me the most fun part of it, but you have to get back out here and do the rest of it. But anyway, that's that. So just a little video about what's in the fuel tank. Is it gas? Is it fuel? Is it kerosene? What is it? 'Cause I didn't want to have to tear all that apart, because it looks to me like that switching valve assembly is up on the frame up under here. And just looking at it, looking at the way the clamps look, it looks like that's all been apart and been reworked fairly recently. So I don't want to touch it. Because these things they don't have problems, because the gas trucks have fuel pumps in the fuel tanks. And these don't have a fuel pump back here because it's a diesel. It's up at the engine. So you don't have to worry about that. But some of them, these things can flake out, and it will empty the rear tank into the front tank. And then the front tank overflows dramatically. So I've learned on these things just quickly is that you're best off, if you're going to replace something on one of these trucks, like a switching valve or a thermostat or anything like that, you better just buy a Motorcraft and just take the pain and just go ahead and pay for it, because apparently everything else is just not going to work. So we'll see how this, I'm going to let it just remain as is until I get the cooling and all the maintenance done on it, because it's got plenty of fuel in it, looks like, so I don't have to worry about that. And then when I'm not worried about it flaking out or running out of fuel somewhere, I'll go back and hook that switch up, make sure it's actually gonna work, because I don't know, be blunt about it, I really don't have a use for two tanks on it, not unless I was going across country, and I don't know when that would ever happen with this truck. So I can run off the back tank, you know. As much as I don't drive a pickup truck very much, you know, it's just no big deal. All right, I'm rambling, so thought you just like a little update about this. I'm convinced now, because gasoline, the corn gas we have now, if I had done that, that would have stuff been gone. You didn't even know it was here, but it did smell a little weird, but I'm satisfied. Aight. All right, guys. Well, I've got a long way to go on this truck. Long way to go on it. So we'll get there. Thanks for tuning in. See you around.